So what does it actually mean to be spiritual? One may arrive at the correct answer by asking the question, what is the opposing pole of spiritual? This is physical, is this not so? So what does it mean to be physical? To be physical means to dwell in the realm of physicality, to exist in the realm of the physical. So what it means to be spiritual is that one dwells in the realm of the spirit, which means one is perceptive and receptive to the realm of the spiritual, and that your conscious energy and focus is primarily focused on the non-physical, quantum, etheric, or spiritual realm of existence and life. For one to be spiritual means that one has put the realm of the physical behind the importance of the spiritual. Now understand, relatives, both the physical and spiritual are connected inherently and express themselves into, onto, and through one another simultaneously and affect one another directly. But one preceded the other's genesis, and the predecessor must be acknowledged and understood as the root of physical life and honored as such in one's expression of life, if one wishes to reattain connection with Source and live in harmony with the rest of the natural living breathing cosmos. Now, in practice and application within the natural world, as both a physical and spiritual being, dwelling within a physical and spiritual environment, this means one lives life focused on the perfection and blossom of one's soul and the collective soul, and interacts with the world external to oneself, predicated upon the highest natural spiritual law and understanding, which is that we are all one, and that we are all here to generate the experiences and provide the stimulus and circumstance required for each other to complete one another and lead to the perfection, distillation, and blossom of each other's and the collective soul. In this, our physical life now becomes nothing more than an expression of that intention and understanding, and serves as the physical allegory of the fulfillment of that spiritual commitment and law. Now, how that looks expressed as physical allegory in the form of a human being, as in human beings living the original instructions in harmony with the rest of the natural living breathing world around us, living in our original and unperverted forms, in our unmolested natural environments, as nothing greater or lesser than yet another symbiotic, interdependent aspect of a natural ecology and spiritual physical circumstance and environment within the natural world. Living the original instructions and way of life where Creator had made us and left us to fulfill our Teypohs'weepeehl, our sacred incarnative function and purpose that awaited us in this realm, on this particular leg of our soul's journey within Teypohs'weepeehl. As all various forms, shapes, modes, and expressions of life have a natural, collective, and intimate inherent purpose and function in which they're all bound to perform, to live in harmony with themselves and all other pronunciations or expressions of life within this realm. If one incarnates into the human form, this simply means one has graduated on a soul level to an incarnative form where one has been given the freedom to choose to honor this and physically, spiritually thrive and continue one's ascension, or to neglect this and physically, spiritually regress and suffer. And merely fulfilling and expressing oneself through and within these natural states, shapes, or pronunciations of life itself is what facilitates the most direct path of one's soul journey back to Source, back to oneness, wholeness. And living out of harmony of the natural matrix or natural mainframe and its natural laws will always lead to suffering and is the most indirect path back towards Source. You see, relatives, civilized man disconnected from reality, out of rhythm, out of step and stride with the ebb and flow of the natural living breathing universe, disconnected from Source and out of harmony with the natural world, completely ignorant to and living in bane of the sacred balance, is only left with his manufactured concepts of morality, ethics, of goodness and badness to guide him. And since these concepts do not actually exist in the realm of reality, and are completely defined by a despotic ruling class of social architects whom are so systematically ever changing the terms and conditions of what is goodness and what is badness to fit the current agenda of that particular place and time to serve their purpose. Civilized man is taking whatever direction his limited perception and limited state of awareness allows him to be taken, and he remains lost, and a useful idiot, ripe for exploitation at his own expense, and at the expense of his own body, mind, and soul, and at the expense of every other expression of natural life in the territories in which he occupies. When one lives in harmony with one's own natural, physical, and spiritual environment, respecting and observing the natural laws, both higher and lower, living to maintain the Teypohs'weepeehl, the sacred balance, the nourishing center point, by first establishing it within oneself and then living to express it externally or outwardly, living as the authentic and original pronunciation and expression of the form and shape of life in which one has incarnated into. One does not need to trouble oneself with the toil of such spurious civilized concepts such as goodness and badness, or vex oneself with the plight of how one is to be good or how one is not to be bad. One's very existence and enjoyment of life and expression of oneself in this state of paradise and bliss is nourishment and metas for all whom she comes into contact with. So she nourishes all, and all she comes into contact with nourishes her. This is true wealth, relatives. As the whole and entirety of this realm serve her and provide her nourishment, irregardless of their intention, shape, form, and pronunciation. You see, for the Tlamachazka Matzat, the sacred pronghorn deer, and the Teypohs'weepeehl, the Shaj orange tree, the Mahuili, the worm, the Pipiolin, the bee, as they live each day doing the things that they most greatly love to do, fulfilling their expression of paradise and life, they never stop for a moment to think, what must I do today to be good and to support and save the world? They never ask themselves these things. Nor is there a moment in their lives where any of these beings are concerned or even consciously aware of all of the nourishment they provide to the various aspects and archetypes of the natural world who reside just outside of their scope of perception and experience, that are reliant and dependent on their mere presence simply as they are and as they do. Yet they complete and support and nourish every other aspect of this physical and spiritual world in which they inhabit as they currently are, by simply being and enjoying life in their natural shape and form. Is this not so? How simple life is, and how simple completing life is, and fulfilling one's IGTV when one remains in one's unperverted and unmolested form. You see, life is not complicated when one observes and lives by the natural laws, and the journey back to source is the most direct. The choice of how complicated and complex one wishes to make life, and how obscure and how indirect of a path one wishes to travel back to source, and how much suffering one wishes to experience cyclically is up to oneself and ultimately up to the needs of one's soul. Either way, one's soul will be provided the exact algorithm of experiences one needs in the various and many micro realms this plane currently contains, from the most beautiful to the very most nightmarish, as one's nechiot, one's desire, which will be defined and predicated by the current limitations of one's state of awareness, will always lead one to the environment and circumstances necessary to experience one's teyol memechatin, or karma, that will eventually lead to the eventual perfection of one's soul and the liberation from these circumstance, environments, and planes. So at this point of our reflection, I can already hear the cries of my non-traditional people saying, well, not everyone may live as a natural human being. Not everyone is able to live out in nature and return to their symbiotic and ancestral responsibilities and natural interdependent symbiotic relationship to and with the rest of the natural world. It is impossible, so what do I do now? Well, first, relatives, I will go further and say that currently, while the world lives under the dominion of civilized man, no human being, and most of the natural animals and natural plants which are dying and becoming extinct to provide civilized man his inverted, unnatural lifestyle and dietary practices in which he's afraid to let go of, are not able to either live a natural life within their natural environment any longer. And this is clear to see in the world today. Is this not so? As well, I will answer this question simply and honestly. So listen closely, relatives, and keep and guard these words deep within your hearts, and never forget them. If one is not able to live as a natural human being, if one is not able to live out in nature and return to one's own original, symbiotic, and ancestral responsibilities that inherently belong to us all, and reattain one's inherent, symbiotic, and natural, nourishing interdependent relationship to and with the rest of the natural living, breathing world around oneself, if it has become impossible, as you say, then one's sacred incarnative purpose, one's IGTV, one's function as an indigenous human being, as sons and daughters of this Mother Earth, as brothers and sisters of plant and animal, if that is what one claims to be, currently living under the dominion of civilized man, then one's sacred incarnative purpose then becomes to live to remove whatever obstacles and inhibitions, both internal and external, that are present within this plane, that are currently inhibiting one from being able to return back to one's natural and inherent relationship to and within the rest of the natural living, breathing cosmos. And that, relatives, make no mistake, begins always within. Killing the colonizer and killing the enslaver begins with killing the civilized man that was manufactured within oneself, that makes one uncomfortable, incapable, impotent, and afraid within one's own natural environment and natural circumstances that still exist outside of the confines of the manufactured matrix that is the civilized world. You see, spirituality does not dwell in the ceremony and ritual that has become the mere husk of lost and misunderstood tradition. Spirituality is not any of the 7 liberal arts and sciences in which the Kinametsin giants, the progenitors and master of civilized man, had to invoke and bring to this middle realm from the lower 9 realms of Chichona and Mictlan, from where they came from, to survive in this realm, out of sync with nature, as an unnatural observer rather than a natural participant. Spirituality does not dwell in the numerology, geometry, mathematics, or geometrical mathematical articulations of the physical plane, nor in civilized man's barbaric weights, measurements, observations, articulations, and analysis of the astrological, physical, micro and macro realms, whom he may be able to physically perceive, but will never be able to feel or understand, because he has severed his connection to the natural living, breathing cosmos and has forsaken its laws. Spirituality does not dwell in the simple manipulation or alchemy of herbs, plants, minerals, metals, and chemical compounds to make the tinctures, poultices, and potions to troubleshoot and combat the ramifications of engaging in civilized dietary and lifestyle practices. Spirituality does not either dwell in any of the modes and sciences that serve to provide temporary reprieve for the physical and energetic vessel through stretching, breathing, meditation, and conscious manipulation of the physical vessel and energy body, which were developed by the enslaved race of the second age or second sun to directly address the physiological, psychological, and energetic consequences of living a forcibly imposed civilized life. Spirituality does not aim nor serve to provide comfort to quell civilized man's pains, discomfort, ramifications, and karma of living an inverted and unnatural way of death, not of life, that harms all of the natural world that surrounds it or comes into contact with it. What is even prayer other than a blatant expression of civilized man's own greed, desires, his spiritual, physical laziness, and cowardice. What is prayer besides a blatant expression of civilized man's own blatant ignorance of the higher laws, methods, meanings, and procedures of life that generate and prescribe the physical, spiritual environments, circumstances, and experiences contained within those environments and circumstances that lead to the perfection of one's own and the collective soul? What is prayer besides a blatant expression of one's own dishonorable nature, seeking to now even harness, ensnare, and exploit the very divine for his own benefit, like he has already done to the plants, animals, and other human beings whom he has perverted and forcibly domesticated and eugenically altered to survive, outsourcing the responsibility of his very own physical survival that is supposed to be dependent upon one's capability to live in harmony with the rest of the natural breathing world as an interdependent symbiotic aspect of one's own natural environment, not of one's own cleverness. These things are not spirituality, relatives, but merely expressions of the symptoms of disconnection from source, from the spiritual realm of existence and ignorance of natural laws and procedures that govern and give purpose to the natural world and the physical spiritual experience. Spirituality is the flame within that is divine inspiration, that liberates, that pushes one towards the acquiescence of a state of boundlessness, that seeks only oneness, that seeks only wholeness, reunification, that seeks itself and only itself. A flame that once fanned, ignites, engulfs, and incinerates one's corpus, burning every dense layer of ego, fear, desire, and perceived notion and illusion of what is self, until all that is left is the all, the ether, the Teyyot, allowing the attainment of one's true state of being within this realm. Within one's nourishing center point, within one's sacred balance. Humble, centered, whole, and now ready, qualified, and competent to serve the Creator within every other being, organism, and expression of life.